Hello and welcome to another episode of Anomalies. This is a program about taking mysterious twists and turns off of life's roads. And I think our guest today is going to take us down some interesting twists and turns. So I'm Dan Hall, one of your hosts, and with me is my buddy and co-host, Gwen Farrell. Gwen, how are things with you? Looks like they're
I'm doing
pretty good.
great. How about you?
I'm well. For an old guy, I'm well. Our guest today, I got to see him in person here. So it's been about a month or so ago now. I went to visit a friend in Michigan, and she said, "Let's go to a UFO conference." Of course, being a consummate weirdo like I am, I said, "Sure, let's go." And the Reverend Michael Carter was a speaker, one of the presenters. And I thought, gosh, he'd really be interesting to have on our show. So he graciously agreed to do that. We want to welcome you, Michael, to the
Thank
show.
you for
And
having me. It's
oh,
good to be
sure,
here.
anytime. And Gwen, I think you have some bio information that you want to share about Michael.
Sure, I'd love to share this with everybody.
And
So,
Gwen, you
Reverend,
can make it short if it's too long. I didn't mean to interrupt. Just
yes,
tweak it.
I already did that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
right.
Thank
Uh,
you.
okay, here we go. Reverend Michael Carter is originally from Baltimore, Maryland. He is an ordained interfaith minister and received his BA in letters from the College of New Rochelle and master's in divinity from Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and has served as a staff chaplain at various hospitals in New York and in North Carolina. He is a longtime UFO contactee and has written multiple books, including Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness, God Consciousness, a 30-day meditation manual for God conscious thinking, The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer, and his most recent one, Initiation, the Spiritual Transformation of the Experiencer, all of which are available at Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. He has also appeared on George Noory's Coast to Coast radio show and his TV show Beyond Belief on Gaia Television. He's a regular consultant on the History Channel's Ancient Alien series, as well as being featured in the UFO TV documentary The Real 4400 and UFOs The Hidden Evidence on the Travel Channel, the History Channel's History's Greatest Mysteries, and was also featured in Steven Spielberg's documentary Abduction Diaries. Michael Carter, welcome to Anomalies.
Thank you so much. Happy Friday to you all. And I love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year, going into Thanksgiving and Christmas and the other holidays. So my spirits are up. And again, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank
Well,
you.
we're
I
happy
think
to.
I'm going to ask Dan if he would like to start off with the questions. Are you up for that,
Oh,
Dan?
oh, sure. I would be a terrible host if I wasn't up for that. So, what drew you, Michael? What drew you to the ministry? What caused you to want to become a minister?
That's a great question. I think it was a number of things. The first thing I think it was is because, like any small child, you want to please your parents. And my parents were very religious people, at least my stepdad who raised me and my mom still are. That's number one. And number two, I think it was a past life thing because I was always very comfortable in houses of worship, always, whether it was a temple or a church, a synagogue, a mosque. I just had this comfortability, and so that was always there underlying everything. And I wanted to serve, I wanted my life, even at that young age. I didn't know, I thought I wanted to be a priest. I didn't know the difference. But and then at one time I wanted to be a therapist. I was an adult then, kind of like a secular priest. But I wanted to serve. I wanted my life to mean something, and that I would be able to help others. So those were the three things that come to mind.
Now, frequently people who go into the ministry don't do so to talk about extraterrestrials, but you were drawn
No,
to that. No, they don't.
what?
I don't think so. Uh, uh, but it seems to me that one of
I
the
didn't
reasons,
know that.
well, I don't know, that's just a wild guess on my part.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you.
So I think one thing I know about you that kind of has these two different streams of thought come together is you're a contactee, correct?
Yes, and have been for a good number of years, and still do, not as frequently as before, as currently as 2019, I think. Where I'm talking about where they're in my room, not where if I have a dream about them or something like that. Yeah, what had happened was I was going through well, seminary was life-changing for me, and because I went to a seminary that was rigorous intellectually, but seminary is designed to make you doubt, to make you read, what is it? The unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined faith is not worth having. And so it really kind of turned me inside out. And at that time, um, I was I was looking for the historical Jesus, and that took me on all kinds of paths. And I got away from Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. Let's put it like that. And so I kept trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, and I left it. I went on a journey where I was an agnostic. I didn't know and I didn't care. And then at one point, I even identified as an atheist. I still do meditate a lot. I like Buddhism, but that's a philosophy instead of a religion. You can use Buddhism to make you a better Christian, Muslim, atheist, whatever. And but I was on this path of self-discovery. And the old adage, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I guess
Mhm.
I could say that I wasn't a Trekkie until maybe about 5 years ago. And that was good because the things that were happening to me later, people would say, "Oh my God, you that didn't happen to you. You saw that on television." But on in 1989, December 28th, 1989, my girlfriend at the time and I went to see the pyramids in Chichen Itza and Tulum on the Yucatan there. And it was our vacation. And, it was fascinating. I mean, how did these people get this information about astronomy and astrology? And Mexico was just wonderful. We got back home and she was tired. I was living in New York City. And when we got back to JFK, she said she was going to stay home and unpack. And I had been invited to a get together with some friends near Times Square in Hell's Kitchen. So I went. A few people gathered, no adult beverages. I'm a deviled egg freak, and they had tons of it. I love them so much. And so, they oohed and awed. I was kind of coppery, and my hair had turned colors. And, I kind of wanted to glow. It was 85 degrees, 87 degrees there. And of course, it was freezing in New York. So I went home. And that night, I don't know to this day whether I had to use the bathroom or what, but I kind of felt a presence in the room. And when I turned around, that's why I was looking. Hold on. When I turned around, this person was at the foot of my bed. Now, this person didn't have the robe on. I have a friend who makes every being I see, I tell her about, and she makes it for me. This person has on a robe. He's like a Buddha. But this individual in my room that night did not. He was fully clothed. I guess it was a he. He had on a jumpsuit that looked like it was made of Reynolds wrap. He was about 4 feet tall, tops. Kind of that. He wasn't gray. He was a chalk white color. And my girlfriend at the time would not move, would not budge. I was afraid, like I've never been afraid before. And around this individual was a blue light, like his aura was blue. It wasn't just this energy. And behind that was a white light, like my room was lit up like Times Square. And so what I did, I was so afraid, I was so frightened, I just got in the fetal position and pulled the covers up over my head. When that happened, I heard the sound like the wind was blowing, like whoosh. And I felt the temperature change, like I was outside of my house. My apartment, we lived at, well, she still lives there at the Excelsior Hotel in New York City on the Upper West Side, between Columbus and Central Park West. At that time, it was a residential hotel, so you could rent, like having an apartment there, which is what we did. And when I finally grew a pair and pulled the covers down, nobody was there.
Hmm.
The room was deathly quiet. My girlfriend woke up, and I told her, and she's a deeply understanding person and spiritual person. She could have said, "What are you, some kind of a nut?" So we talked about it, and twice a month, every full and new moon, this person or his friends would come. They would not talk. They would show me pictures in my head. And so I was not getting any sleep. Obviously, I was a wreck. But somehow I started to change. I was already on a spiritual path, but I just felt more authentic, and I was working towards that. I was going to therapy. I was doing some things just on my path, but they kind of expedited it. I got into healing because of them, energy work. And then down the line, I've been visited by reptilians. I had a healing from a Nordic person. I don't want to be rude and get up and go get it, but if you want me to get them, I can show you. I've seen an Arcturian in my room, and the last person I saw back in 2019 was a praying mantis being. Yes.
Interesting.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah.
Gwen, feel free to climb on
Oh,
board
yeah.
here.
I have a lot of questions here. So, something that you mentioned, Michael, is something that I hear and have heard many times with my experiencer clients, and that is the lifelong ones, or the ones that start having experiences earlier in life, is that they have these difficult repeating experiences. It's difficult, it's difficult, it's difficult, and then they stop. And then they don't come for a while. And then they start missing them. And they
Yes, I
start
did.
wondering, why are they not coming?
Yes.
So the
Yes.
fact that you say that's what you experienced as well, and so how do you make sense of that? Why do you think that happens? You're not the only one. Why do you think other humans experience that too?
I think that there is, I went through, like many folks did, I went through the terror and, having my reality shattered and that kind of thing, and losing sleep and living a double life and that kind of thing. But as I mentioned, or I touched on, the spiritual growth that happened, it was, I started to miss them. It was, it's the same thing that you fear, it's the same thing that you're attracted to. The mysterium tremendum is a phrase in theology when they talk about God, if you will, this tremendous mystery. There were times when I thought, did I do something wrong or what have you? The only thing I can tell you is I don't really know. There were times in my life when probably they would have been a distraction. When I was going through personal things with divorces, deaths in my family. I'm just guessing. I mean, they probably would have been of some help, but I always knew they were around me. But yeah. Sometimes years went by when I didn't see them. And then the last time I saw one was the praying mantis person, who I had never seen one before. The Nordic person healed a blood clot that I had, which was interesting because I had to explain it to a doctor without saying what would happen. They probably would have medicated me.
Mm.
But and it was just that I felt more fully alive. And but then I learned that I could get that myself. I remember having a dream once early on, and I was in a little scout craft, and I was in the back seat in the dream, and it was I'll call it a gray person was in the front, and I was sitting in the back and looking at the cosmos and what have you, and all of a sudden in the dream, uh, he said, "You get up front, you drive." I said, "No, no, 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 I don't know." And he said, "Get in the front." And he got in the back. And we were going forward. And then I woke up. And for me, that was a message that you are still in control of your life. Don't rely on us. You have autonomy. We're not gods. Not that I thought they were, but it was like I was getting so, yeah, and that was a great dream. And we were moving forward. But he said, "Yeah, no, no, you get up front." And when I talk to people, and whether it's live or one-on-one, I just remind them of that you still have agency. If because some of the beings may not want you to have that, and because all of them have their own agendas and what have you, but whether it's a spirit or an extraterrestrial, whatever, you have agency, and anybody that takes that from you, you need to be, or tries to, you have to be leery of. We have our lives to live, and what we do with them is up to us. And I think that's very important to remember.
Okay, good. Did you always feel that you could say no to them? That you didn't have to have the experience? Or if they showed up, you could say, "I don't want to deal with you right now. Leave me alone or come back later"?
No,
Or
I'll be honest with you, that never even crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind. I had had some entities that I thought didn't have my best interest in mind. I don't know whether they were extraterrestrial or not. And I just said a prayer, or just said, I remember one entity was around me. I could feel it in my house. It was just very negative. And I remember saying to myself, saying a prayer, and I was surrounded in this white light, and the being said to me in my head, "Yeah, right," but left, but left. But I haven't had a lot of negative experiences, and I've been very fortunate that way. And the reason why I came out about this so strongly is because I see what human beings do to each other. We stereotype and we put each other in boxes. And at the time I was having my experiences, most of the people I knew or heard about were having bad experiences, or what they interpreted as such, and they were bad-mouthing these beings. And so I was, and a group of other people said, "Well, wait a minute, we're not denying what happened to you, but there's also a different side to that. And we need to be able to talk about that, and not just have their demons. They did this, they did that, and the other." Some of them have, and I won't argue that with folks who've had sperm taken over them, anal probes, yeah, horrible. But there are others that have not. And if we look through our history biblically, or, other narratives, pardon me, we see that there's some beings who are more benevolent, and there's some who aren't, just like human beings.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's so much about perspective, which is something that, as you're doing therapy work and the work that I've done, we know how important perspective is. That's one of the most important therapeutic methods to use, is to help people see things differently. And so I think that's a real gift that you can offer. And that's one thing that I really like about your new book, Initiation, because I love that I see that you're offering experiencers a new perspective on their situation. Having worked with experiencers for many years, I've seen the ones, like you say, who do well, and the ones that have trouble. And it's very, very easy for them, when they go through a traumatic experiences, to kind of get stuck in that.
Yes.
And not know how to get out of it, or not, even if it's good, not know how to move forward through it. And I see that that initiation perspective is very different. And it's a good, helpful way for people to look at this. So I really appreciate that about the book.
Well, thank you. And just I wanted to get people to know that, it doesn't even have to be extraterrestrial. It could be whatever. I mean, you can have a near-death experience. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. But it's something that it's unexplained and it's life-changing. And like Oliver Wendell Holmes says, paraphrasing, once the mind has been stretched, it can never go back to its original dimensions. And so, you can run from it, but it's life-changing. And it's okay to let people know that you're not the only person and that there are people you can share that with.
That's terrific. Yeah. Dan?
Well, so Gwen obviously has had some contact with experiencers. She and I belong to something called Opus. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah,
with it.
I'm familiar. Yes.
Okay. So one of the questions that, and I just was talking to a contactee about this, why me? That was his question. Why did these beings choose me? So what's your perspective on why you were chosen?
I hear that a lot. I'm one of these people, Gwen, Dan, that I can live with mystery. I don't know. I can speculate. I had a psychic tell me once, a very accurate psychic, tell me that I had been with these people in other lifetimes, that I had kind of signed on to come back and to do certain things that I didn't do before. I wouldn't say it was particularly karmic, but it is in a way. But I don't know. I'm just glad they did.
Good.
A pretty good perspective to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering about as we're talking here is how do you incorporate your contactee experience into your ministry, or do you?
At the beginning, I was like the government, I just didn't tell them. And then as I went on, it was kind of like an open secret. People started watching TV. I did have a woman who tried to get me fired from my job many years ago. She said she was flipping channels early. She couldn't sleep one night. And I'm assuming it was Ancient Aliens. And she said, I saw my minister on TV talking about little green men, quote unquote. But the board stood up for me, which I was surprised, pleasantly so. I don't talk about it as much. I may throw some things in there. They know now, but that's not what they hired me to do. And it's not a UFO church, so to speak. I know a couple of years ago, some people came and they were in the area and they dropped by, and it was very flattering, but they were surprised that I wasn't speaking on that as a topic, and I wasn't. But now I'm a little more open about it. They know that I believe what I believe. They know I'm a contactee or an experiencer. They know that I believe in reincarnation. They know these things, but I don't force it on them. And being in the Unitarian Universalist world, we don't have a doctrine where, there's a bishop or whatever where I could really get in trouble for. So I've been very fortunate that way. So I don't really talk about it, but I will throw it in if I think it's relevant. They do know that I believe that we live in a populated universe, and some of them do as well. But I still walk that line because, again, that's not what they hired me for. But I give them just enough to either be curious or they could just say, okay, and we move on.
What I'd like to ask is, you have obviously gone a different direction than probably most Christian ministers would. And do you think that that had anything to do with your contact experiences, or that you said you had some strange activities or strange events when you were a child? Do you think
Yes.
that they were there, that they've been there to sort of lead you in that other direction? or that they're related at all, or what do you think about that?
Well, again, we go back to agency. I don't know if they were leading me, but I'm sure they were guiding me. Remember, I went through this whole thing where I left Christianity, again, conservative Orthodox Christianity, for a while. And I kind of traveled this road that I'm glad I did. And my spirituality is very eclectic. But what sticks with me is always are the teachings of Jesus. Now, I'm very well versed in comparative religion. I do very much resonate with the teachings of the Buddha, who lived 500 years before Jesus. I remember a long time ago, Gwen and Dan, I was listening to the Dalai Lama, and he was saying for people who wanted to leave their religion to come to Buddhism, specifically Christians. And he said, if you feel you absolutely must, then do it. But he said, A, do not talk bad about your old religion if you do. And secondly, don't leave until you've explored it as much as you possibly can. And then if you still feel like it doesn't work for you, then that's fine. And I think that's what I've done. I've come back to those teachings very recently. And I see them in a new way. I'm a different person. So the long answer is, you can still be a Christian, I think, and or whatever, but a Christian and believe in extraterrestrial life. If you are, if you're in monotheism especially, but if you come to believe that we live in a populated universe, then it will force you to change your perspective of what God is. And that was one of the beautiful things about it. And that's one of the reasons I left more Orthodox Christianity, because God was so small within a box. And you can always tell when God, you make God in your own image, because God hates the same people you hate. And I just needed to get away from that. And researched and what have you. And, it's bigger. It's so much bigger. And I've learned to live with mystery. One of the things I love about, for instance, the Lakota nation is they refer to the Great Spirit as Wankatonkin, which means the Great Mystery. And I've learned to be comfortable with mystery. That's one of the things I learned from the Eastern philosophies. But in the West, we have to be certain. This is right, and this is wrong, and this is what God says, and this is it. And it's almost like you got God on speed dial. And I've used the word God more in these past 3 minutes than I probably have all month. Because usually that word has a lot of baggage with it. But I just know that there's something greater than me that I come from and that I will go back to, that it's not anthropomorphic. If I read some Palladian literature, they call it creation, as do some native folk. But I don't believe so much in a personal God that's watching over me like Santa Claus. But I believe when I meditate or when I pray or when I walk in the woods in nature, I'm in touch with that energy. It's in me. And that was very different from the way I was raised. And so it's very comforting to know that. And I must treat people as such, because we come from that same source, no matter what name you want to call it.
I'd like to ask, many experiencers speak about making pre-life agreements.
Yes.
Before they come to this earth, that is for the purpose of guiding them perhaps through this life here, or are teaching them how to relate to their star families, human families, whatever. What's your opinion about that? Not everybody believes in pre-life agreements. What about
Yeah, and that's what I was touching on when I said my my psychic friend. He was a very gifted psychic, and he was telling me about some past lives, and they've shown me some past lives that I've had. But I think there's some truth to that, because I believe in life after life. Well, actually, I won't say afterlife. Life is continuous, and I do believe in reincarnation and karmic stuff. So it makes more sense to me that you come back another time to learn some lessons. Maybe you come back white instead of native, or you come back male or female, you come back gay or straight or what have you. That seems like a good plan. And so I personally think that there's some validity to that perspective.
Good, interesting. Okay. Dan?
We had the opportunity to interview Angela Smith. Is that her name right? Gwen?
Yes, Angela Thompson Smith.
Right. Do you know about her?
No, I
Michael?
don't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So she wrote a book called Voices of the Cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was kind of interesting about that book was she used her skills as a remote viewer to contact all these alien civilizations. And many interesting aspects to that. But was one of the interesting aspects, it seemed to me, was that some of these races didn't believe in a supreme being. That
Yes.
So I found that kind of interesting. Do you have a perspective on that? Have any of the beings that you've been in contact with, have they talked about the concept of God or something similar to that?
No, they haven't. But in the literature, there are some beings who relate to it as superstition, or maybe they don't believe it in the same way that we do. I've read some literature where the beings do believe in something greater than them, but it may not be something that they would bow down and worship because they're saying, I'm part of this. Again, if you read some of Billy Meyer's stuff, if you read a lot of the Latin American contactees who seem to bump into the Nordics a lot, they talk about, some of them talk about God, and obviously George Adamski, he adhered to the Christian story. He just changed all the angels to extraterrestrials. That's a way to look at it. I did that at the beginning, but there are some beings who do, but not in the sense. I mean, they're not killing each other over it. Do you know what I mean? Very rarely will you hear extraterrestrials at war with each other because of a belief in a God. There's some strong language from Billy Meyer's Palladian contacts, they're almost anti-religion, and at the same time they do recognize other gods that are merely extraterrestrial, but they call the supreme God, if you will, the supreme energy. They call that creation, and they say that human beings are mistaken. We should be, and they don't use the word should, but that's who you want to direct your energy to, not the gods in between. But a lot of that, gang, is because we've been taught that the gods in the Bible, or that the God in the Bible is God. We've been taught that Yahweh is God, and Yahweh is an extraterrestrial, to my mind, with some anger management problems. And so look what we have. We have a lot of things going on in the Mideast right now. Yes, there's the geopolitical stuff, there's oil, there's a lot of other stuff going on. But if you notice, all three of those, the Christians, the Jews, and Muslims, they're all worshiping this God who is vengeful, who is warlike. I mean, there's no coincidence that if your God is warlike, then you have to be warlike. If your God is into genocide, then you have to be into genocide. And so you give up. That's why people leave the church. They say this God doesn't fit what the New Testament or what this Jesus person is saying, and I can't make it fit anymore. So rather than, they don't, what I'm saying is probably too far out for them, but they say, I got to go, because they can't reconcile. I mean, and when we look at these wars and other things, you go, what kind of God would sanction that?
Yeah.
So that's some of the stuff that I try to tackle, and I try to keep that in the back of my mind. That you know, if again, if your God is warlike, if your God is genocidal, if your God is, very myopic, then you're going to be that way because that's who you worship. If your God doesn't like women and thinks women should be second-class citizens, then that's the way you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is to kind of try and move beyond that. And again, when you say I live in a populated universe, I know that or I believe that, then your concepts start to change. But we know people don't like the change because it's uncomfortable.
Great. I'd like to go back to your first book, which was that was a remarkable accomplishment. That was the first book, as I understand it,
yes, Alien Scriptures, yes.
That was written by someone with your background and has been considered, I don't want to use the word Bible, but has been considered kind of the Bible of, I think, that kind of thinking possibly now. And what I wanted to ask you about that is that must have been difficult for you. Publishing
Yes,
a book, putting it
yes.
out there. What kind of reactions did you get from people in your area,
Yeah.
in your field, in your church?
Great question.
How was that for you?
Great question. And I want to say something before I answer that. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people. I stand on the shoulders of Dr. Barry Downing, my friend and colleague. He wrote a book in '68 called The Bible and Flying Saucers. Morris K. Jessup, who wasn't a clergy person, but who died under mysterious circumstances in the '50s. He wrote something called UFOs in the Bible. A woman by the name of Reverend Virginia Brasington, right here in North Carolina. She wrote a book, and she was clergy. So there are a couple others, but I just want to say, first of all, I thank you for that. And Whitley was very kind at the time, Whitley Strieber, saying it's one of the best books on the subject. But having said that, if not for them, I wouldn't be here. It was difficult for me. I was still in the closet around those issues. And if you notice, if you read the book, I put most of my experiences into initiation. I only mentioned one in there.
Right.
It will, again, standing on people's shoulders. Union Theological Seminary is one of the top seminaries in the country, very progressive seminary, rigorous in its intellectual discipline, and so it was wonderful. And I have to credit them because when I came up with this to write it, this was my master's thesis, and then I added on to it. And they said to me, do it. They could have said, hey, man, you can't graduate from here writing tripe like this. And after I wrote it, 2 professors asked me to stay on for a PhD. It was wonderful. It was difficult, yes. And, a lot of church people just kind of shunned me. They said it was blasphemy. They said I was dealing with the devil, those kinds of things. And it was difficult. But a woman by the name of Barbara DeBolt from Blue Star Publishing, little mom and pop publisher in Arizona, she published it first. And she pushed me. She said, you gotta do it. You're gonna be helping people, Michael. You can't be afraid to do it. So I did it. And I don't even know if Barbara's still alive now. I still have the first book there that she published for me, typos and all. But I got it out. But I also had a lot of people who, as you say, Gwen, they were so grateful. It got them thinking. People said, boy, I always thought kind of that, and you've kind of articulated it for me, that kind of thing. So it was a reward, but you got to go through a little turbulence, I guess, in life. And so I did. And now because we've had the hearings and stuff, I get to have the last laugh. 25 years ago, people said, you're crazy. Now I can say, I told you so. I told you so. And so that's been kind of rewarding.
Yeah. I'd like to stay with one more question about that book, the particular book. because it is so fascinating. And I read it years ago, and then I just, when I heard you were going to come on, I went back and pulled it up again and took another look so that I could refresh my mind. And so I assume you do write in the book about things that that are written in the Bible as miraculous events that you think may be related to UFOs, related to otherworldly beings, etc.
Yes.
But I assume that you don't think that all miraculous events that are in the Bible were related to UFOs and ETs. Or do you think somehow they're all related that
I
way?
do. I do. And I think they're related because the technology that our ancestors were dealing with was like magic.
Yes.
And they did not have the vocabulary, the nomenclature to express what they were seeing. And I think that what we have the words to say, you know, well, that may have been a spirit being, or that was an extraterrestrial, or that chariot is a spaceship, or, you know, those kinds of things. Whereas then they couldn't. And so thus these beings were gods to them.
Mm.
And some of them, you know, were some of them didn't have time to explain, you know, and some of them took advantage of it.
Mm.
But I would say, yeah, I think that the Bible makes more sense when you look at it through the extraterrestrial lens. I think if you look everywhere you see angel, if you put extraterrestrial, the Bible makes more sense. They don't tell you what these angels look like. They don't tell you where they come from. They're hints maybe, but I believe that when you see beings with angels with wings, our ancestors were trying to say these beings could fly. That was their way of telling us that. And so it makes more sense to me that way. In the 21st century mind, those are not miracles at all. We just have words to describe what they're seeing.
And I think many of us these days think that extraterrestrial beings, if you want to call them ETs, whatever you want to call them, have been influencing humans on Earth for probably since before recorded time in one way or another. And there has been guidance there. And one of my favorite biblical stories, this is the one that I wanted to ask you about, is about Saul's conversion experience on the road to Damascus. That is so powerful, and it made a huge difference in the church. I mean, it really changed the church historically from then on. You know, he was a persecutor of Christians, and then he was changed, and then he's Paul, who is, you know, the rock of the Catholic Church. Wow, what powerful guidance that is.
Yes, when he's on the road to Damascus and he talks about, I mean, it sounds like a contact experience. He says, I know a person. He didn't say it's me. And he talks about the layers of heaven. And it's interesting because historically, Paul was a more privileged Jewish person than Jesus. Paul was a Roman citizen. Jesus could be walking along and a Roman tribune or a legionnaire could push him into a ditch, and he would just have to brush himself off and keep going. If you did that to Paul, Paul could report you to Caesar. So interesting, that dynamic. And of course, when you go to Acts 15 and he's talking with Peter and James about, do we keep the Old Testament ways? Do we keep the old covenant? And they decide not to because of the teachings of Jesus. And they were having, you know, Paul, you know, they were saying, Paul, we grew up with him. We followed him. And Paul was saying, yeah, but I met him on the road to Damascus. So we have Paul as a contactee, and we have Paul being open to the Gentiles. So it does change the empire where you don't have to be circumcised. Acts 15 talks about that. There were some dietary restrictions, but and maybe that's what Jesus was talking about when he says, this is the new covenant. I'm welcoming everybody. You don't have to just stick with what Moses was talking about. So and people can go back and Google the Paul's conversion experience. It was a game changer. And then, like all things, when Rome got a hold of it, it became the state religion. And so a lot of the teachings of Jesus were lost. Jesus would never be on the side of empire. And when Constantine decided to make this the official religion of Rome, then we started seeing the church get away, and we've been praying and obeying ever since. When we've had the emperor, and there's the hierarchy was a god, and then the emperor right up there, and then the bishops and the cardinals, and then the priest, and then us. And it's been that way ever since. Yeah.
If people are interested in learning more about a different way of thinking about the historical Jesus, I recommend your book, your first book, because there's a chapter in there about Jesus. And
Yes.
And so I know a lot of people are interested in that. So it's a great book anyway, but I think people who are looking to learn about Jesus might want to take a look at that because there's a whole chapter in there. And
yes, thank you. And I would suggest too that they read some books that, more conventional books. There's Jesus Through the Ages. There's Jesus Living in India. But if you get the basic, because if you're going to break or bend the rules, you got to know the basics. And maybe you're getting it from your church. But and then you put that next to books like mine. And then you can start seeing where these pieces fit. Because when I look at the Old Testament, I compare that with the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the Akkadian and Babylonian accounts of Enki and Leo, and you can see, and that's history there, and you can see just how things kind of progressed, or what things were overlaid with what, and then you get more of a picture about the history of Christianity, and then you just put that layer on it that we are following the teachings of an advanced being, an evolved being. I would say a hybrid. If your dad is not human and your mom is, that means you're not fully human. Again, that helps it make more sense. And we see it. It's not just Jesus. I mean, there stories about the Buddha. There's stories about Lao Tzu. There's stories about these beings. We call them star children. Okay? We call them indigo children. Well, that's what Jesus was. That's what John the Baptist was, because they had contacts. His mother had contact. Samson's mom, who doesn't even get named, she is visited by an angel. So these beings, these are contactees. Obviously Miriam, obviously Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother, his dad. These are contactees, as we said with Paul. So then you start getting, whoa, this has been going on, and it's going on today, and you can get a perspective.
Yeah, it certainly works. Dan, you have a question?
Well, what I'm thinking about is something I mentioned a bit ago. A previous guest of ours talked about one of the problems that we face is she referred to it as a cultural trance. We're in this human-oriented culture, and we have to tend to view everything that happens in terms of we're the top life form on the planet. So do you see this cultural trance? And maybe I'm not articulating it.
No, you are. No, yeah, we've been taught that.
Yeah.
We've been taught that. And it's not to be apologetic for it, but we've been taught that. We've been taught that there's only one God. We've been taught that this God is, all that. And when we read, we say, so the contradictions are there. And we're not taught that it's okay to wrestle with that. We're not taught that. We're taught that if you do that, you are a blasphemer. You are going to hell in a handbasket, So you pull back. And part of the reason that we are the way we are and that we're doing this with the planet, we're destroying our planet, is that we took that verse to go out and subdue the earth and be fruitful and multiply. We use that as an excuse, Western culture,
Western
to
culture.
subdue instead of cooperating. And but we've been taught that we're separate. We're separate from God. We're separate from nature. We're separate from each other. And when you look at life through that lens, you cannot help but be adversarial. Because you're different from me.
Yes.
Yeah. I see you as different. And so I have fear there. And I have the right way. And so whether it's the earth, we will rape and pillage and consume her, and all in the name of progress. And it's androcentric, this male worldview, a specific male, if we want to be honest. And that's part of the reason we have some of the problems that we have on this planet. We got rid of all the female energy, and so then we became monotheistic. And if that wasn't bad enough, then it was a male god. Because if you go back and look, I talked about in Michigan, if you go back and look at early Judaism, it was not anthropomorphic. There were many gods because they were worshiping some of the extraterrestrials who came to help, taught them how to make beer, taught us what plants were good for consciousness, taught about, making us civilization, sanitation. And then you had those who were more warlike and were just using us for the resources. So you had different extraterrestrials and different gods, if you will. And then in the 6th and 7th century BCE, as I talk about Hezekiah and Josiah, they got rid of all that. And there was going to be one temple. There's going to be one God, that's Yahweh. There's going to be one temple in Jerusalem. There's going to be one priesthood for all the obvious reasons and the same reasons we do today.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask one general question here, and I think maybe we're kind of drawing to a close. It won't be my last unless Dan decides he wants to. But the question is, what do you think evil is? I know there are some people who think that evil is real and it stalks the earth and it grabs people and controls people. And then there are people who believe that evil is in the human heart and mind. And I'm sure there are other concepts of it too. But what do you think evil, if there is such a thing as evil with a capital E or not?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure about the concept of evil, Gwen and Dan, and I'll tell you why. I believe in reincarnation. And so in reincarnation, all debts get paid. You do get what's coming to you. It may get it in another lifetime, but all debts get paid. And so that's not to say that the Hitlers, the EDR means, and even people, the evil, the inhumanity that we can do to one another. But if all debts get paid eventually, is that evil? I don't know. I don't know. I tend not to go there because it's easy to point fingers and it's very us and them. It's a very Western concept because everything is black and white, good, evil, black, white, good. So I'm not sure. As of right now, I would say I don't believe in evil. I believe that we do heinous things to one another. I believe we make terrible mistakes. But if you come back to relive and to do those lessons, you have to pay that price. And so things work out.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Dan, did you want to ask another question before we close? Or are you?
Yeah, before we let Michael go back to doing his thing there in North Carolina. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the state of ufology today. And I'm thinking about Stephen Greer's a National Press Club event, hauling people like David Grush before Congress. So are we any more enlightened about UFOs, and are we still dealing with a government cover-up that's gone on for years? Or is there any truth out there? I guess that's
Oh, of
maybe.
course it is. Remember, I think this is disclosure. It's just not the way disclosure, many people envision Biden or Trump or whoever the emperor is going to be to come out on a White House lawn and say, guess what, folks? I've been lying to you for 70 years. My government, our government, we've had to kill some people too. That's simply not going to happen.
Mhm.
But if you remember, I was telling you about those people who came out, Grush. Remember, I was mentioning about Brigadier General Hayam Ashad, who said, that we've been in touch with extraterrestrials, that there's a galactic council, that there's that there's some extraterrestrials who are for disclosure and some who aren't. I mean, nobody locked him up afterwards. Nobody's medicated him. This guy came out and said that. So we have Grush, we have Greer, we have Elizondo, and so we have what was his name? Medved, the guy on a live mic for Putin, who came out and said, "Hey, we get briefed, we get a document, we get a dossier every time a new person comes on about the." I mean, they're telling you this. I mean, you know what I mean? They're telling you this. That's disclosure. It's a drip, drip, drip. Because if something happens, they can always say, well, we were telling you this. People aren't really listening, but they're telling you that this is going on. Is there still a cover-up? Of course there is. But remember, Hayam Ashad said that there's some extraterrestrial races who don't want us to know because we're not, quote unquote, ready yet. But just go back and look at Josh Villay. Go back and look. They've been telling you that if these people had to sign a clearance in order for them to say what they're saying. They had to have permission to come out and say what they're saying. This is disclosure. Now, because I know we're running out of time, if what Hayam Ashad is saying is true, that there's an extraterrestrial overlay to everything that goes on, and there's some extraterrestrials who are saying, no, we don't want this to happen. We don't know what other treaties we have. We know about Eisenhower's treaty, allegedly, okay, but we don't know what other treaties we have with other extraterrestrial races about disclosure. No one thinks of that. That we may have a treaty with the Greys that say one thing, with the Nordics that say another, whatever, and they may not. Well, some people will say, yeah, we want this to happen, and others don't. Obviously, they're human beings who don't. They're human beings in the halls of Congress who are very fundamentalistic in their Christianity and see this whole thing as demonic. There's some who saying, no, it's not. There's a lot of voices at the table. What gives me hope is that obviously there's some extraterrestrials that are here to see how humankind will evolve. We talked about that, and there always have been. When that happened, and reactor 4 didn't melt down, and there was a picture of the ship there, that gives me hope. Pardon me. Some races who are saying, no, we're not going to just use them. We're not going to take. Well, let's see where this is going to go. So let's wait and see.
Okay, so I'll ask a final question if that's okay, and I think maybe you've covered some of it in that one, and that is, as a whole, based on your experience, your life, your beliefs, how do you think humanity is doing, and where do you think we are going?
Well, it depends on what day you ask me. I will say this. Civilizations have come and gone. We will come and go. People won't even remember us being here. I think the question is still open. I think the question is still open. We could destroy ourselves. Or we could say, you know what? There's another way we can do this. What is interesting is that if you look at Christianity, if you look at the Hopi prophecies, if you look at, pardon me, if you look at the other cultures, Hinduism, Islam, they all talk about a being coming from the sky in a time of turbulence, war, rumors of war, and they say there's a cataclysm that happens, and they come, and they bring some message of hope or what have you. We may be in that time. Plato says it happens every 5,000 years. There's some type of cataclysm or what have you, but maybe we're in those times, and maybe some of these beings are trying to tell us, hey man, if you want to keep on getting what you get and keep on doing what you're doing. What I'm saying is that all, Buddhists are looking for Maitreya, the Hindus are looking for, I think it's Khalil, we're looking for Jesus, the Hindus are looking for, Jews are looking for the Mashiach, Vikings are looking for, the Nordic. All these cultures talk about a time that we live in, and that's happened before, where we get rebooted, where we start all over, where we're right on the brink of something, or maybe it's even after catastrophe, like in the Sumerian tablets and in Genesis.
Mhm.
So the future is up for grabs, and we'll just have to see where we're going. I'm just going to keep trying to stay on the love train. I'm going to keep trying to love my fellow man and women and do what I can, so that whatever happens, when I do my little life review or whatever happens after you leave, I won't have so many regrets. And that's all I can do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Mhm.
Well, I consider myself very fortunate to have gone to the UFO conference in Michigan, so I could have heard Michael speak, and that then he would agree to come on to our show. So thanks again, Michael. We really appreciate it.
Anytime, brother. If you want to talk more, we'll make it happen.
Well, we might take you up on that.
Yeah.
Just
Gwen,
let me know. Let me know. I mean, there's several times I come on because it's a lot to cover, and it's just good to talk.
Mhm.
It's good to talk, share ideas, and yeah, just let me know, and I'll fit it in.
all right, thank you very much. Gwen, I
Thank you
think
very
you have
much. Thank you.
Listen, have a
Uh-huh.
comment.
wonderful holiday season,
You
and
too.
let's talk again. And I wish you
too.
many blessings.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Gwen, did you have
Oh,
Bye.
let me know. Let me know when you're gonna air this. I want to let people see it on YouTube or whatever.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we do
Send me a link.
minimal,
Send me a link.
we do
Okay.
minimal editing, and then we'll forward that on to you. Gwen, did you have a comment about some upcoming shows?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
I wanted to make sure that our viewers know who we have coming next, because we have some, as always, very exciting and interesting shows. And you might be interested in these too, Michael. So on December 4th, we are going to have Trey Hudson, also known as James Hudson, who has written a remarkable book about the southern what is it called, Dan? The Southern Skinwalker Ranch
Oh,
in
Oh
the
yeah.
United States. So he's going to talk about that. And then a little bit later in the week, we're going to have a UK resident, Mark Oley, who's going to be talking to us about
Roswell.
his book, The European Roswell.
Wow.
Those are great. We will be having those, and we'll be letting you know. So we hope that we can see everybody there. And Dan, are we ready to close then?
I think we are. Make sure if you're listening to this, you like and subscribe to us on YouTube. That helps us. And once again, Michael, thank you so much.
Yes. Have a wonderful holiday season, and hope to talk to you soon.
You
Okay,
too.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.